Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Building Stronger Communities Through the Social Economy session. Before I get started, please note that, again, the session is being recorded. It's very nice to see some familiar faces as well as some new ones. So thanks for joining us. My name's Christine Nana, and I'm a 10th generation settler of French ancestry and 6th generation settler of Scottish ancestry. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather and that I'm privileged to call my home for the past 38 years is the traditional unceded territories of the Wolastoqiyik and the Mi'kmaq peoples. So as I just mentioned earlier, my name is Christine Alain. For those of you who do not know me, I'm the Programs and Partnerships Manager within the Community and Social Development Department team of the Southeast Regional Service Commission. I know a number of you are very involved with the work that we do at the Southeast Regional Service Commission, but for those of you who may not know who we are, I'll do a just very quick overview. So what is a Regional Service Commission? It's a regional administrative body. So to answer your quick question that you may be thinking, no, not a municipal government, not provincial government. As you can see on the image, we have 12 commissions in New Brunswick. Commissions were created to improve the delivery and the coordination of local government services. It's governed by a board of directors, and on this board sits all mayors of the region, as well as a representative for the rural district in our region. So what is the Southeast region? We do cover both the Albert and Westmoreland counties, 12 municipalities, and one rural district. So that's composed by the uncolored area of the map that you can see within the dotted line areas. And so that would represent 25% of the population in New Brunswick. So you may ask, what are the Southeast Regional Service Commission mandates? They differ from one commission to another, but here in Southeast, it all originally started with Eco 360. We had solid waste management, which was a regional service. Later, Plan 360 was added. It's land planning for the entire region, with the exception of Moncton and Dieppe, which have their own planning teams. And then with the local governance reform in 2023, the Regional Service Commission was mandated to provide leadership in all of the additional areas that you can see on the screen. So for example, and just to mention it, only the Fundy Capital and Southeast Regional Service Commission have the social mandate. And today's session is hosted by the Community and Social Development Department, as well as the Economic Development Department team. And I will take a quick moment to say that my colleague Joël Dubé, who's on the call right now, he is part of the team. You may have noticed as well that Alexandra was in the original, not before we went to the breakout rooms, she was in the main session. And so she's facilitating the French session, but she's also part of the team. There may be some other ones. I didn't get a chance to see everybody, but we are all working now for the Southeast Regional Service Commission. So we have a special guest today, our facilitator, Vanessa Pisani is the executive director of the Pondé Center of the University of New Brunswick, where she leads initiatives to drive social innovation and system changes. With over 15 years of experience driving outcomes in the social impact sector, Vanessa is dedicated to advancing inclusive workforce development, civic innovation, and just economic systems. As a certified executive coach and currently studying a Master of Arts in Executive and Organizational Coaching, Vanessa is passionate about empowering leaders and organizations to navigate complex challenges and create lasting impact. Under her leadership, Pondé is fostering a more equitable economy, through collaborative cross-sector initiatives that address pressing socioeconomic issues. Vanessa dedicates her volunteer efforts to advancing entrepreneurship and environmental stewardship, championing initiatives that drive positive systemic change in the areas. She served on the board of Venture for Canada for 9 years and previously contributed to the transition committee for the Fundy Trail Parkway, facilitating its shift from a nonprofit to being stewarded by the province of New Brunswick. So without further ado, please welcome our special guests, Vanessa. And Vanessa, the mic is yours. I was going to say the floor is yours, but the mic is yours. So I'll stop sharing my screen and you can share yours.
Yes, before I share my screen, I wanted to do a quick check-in, and my apologies for the little noise there, because of course, you have like someone coming to do service and then they call like right at the minute that you can't take the call. So it's like, okay, here we are. But anyway, my apologies for that. Yeah, so my name is, as Kristen mentioned, Vanessa. I've been working in social enterprise for a number of years now. Really passionate about um really like rethinking, what is the economy, right? And I think probably many of you have watched the Mark Carney at Davos. I thought that was really inspiring. I think it seems to be true that the world order is changing, and part of that is significant economic um, differences, I suppose. And so, really, like what I've been passionate about for maybe, I suppose, a decade or so is thinking through, how can we, at the Punish Money Center, we talk a lot about, how can we have the private sector have more heart and the public sector, the community sector to have more of the operational excellence that the private sector does. And so social enterprise in a lot of ways is starting like kind of on this end where it's saying how do we use market tools to create impact. And I'm sure that there's lots of examples of that all of you both follow, maybe you buy from, or maybe that you're doing already right now. And so, just to help me deliver value to all of you in terms of what you want to get out of this session, I'd love to do a quick check-in to see what you're hoping to get out of this session. I do have this on one of the slides, but I find it easier to just see everybody when I'm not sharing my screen, because then everybody gets really small. So maybe we could do a quick round to see what people would like to get out of the session. So if you want to just share your name, what brought you here today, and if you have an organization that you're representing, then I'd love to hear a little bit about that too. So maybe just a couple sentences. Would anyone like to go first?
I don't mind going first. It's always easier going first than last.
Then
So my
last,
name,
yeah.
my name is Joel Dubé. I'm an economic development officer with the Regional Service Commission at the Economic Development Department. It's a tongue twister, but we're getting better at saying it. What I want to get out of this today is really a better understanding and how I can maybe help more communities within my role on how we can have more social enterprise and um, yeah. So really for me, getting more knowledge out of it is really what I'm striving to get today. Thank you.
Yeah, bring it to community. Yeah, great. Now I think I saw, and I don't know where you are on your own screen, so yeah, go ahead.
All right. Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, perfect. My name is Kavya. I serve as the Economic Development Coordinator for the town of Riverview. The town of Riverview is the largest town in New Brunswick, and we have a lot of community spirit in the town. We have a lot of loyal customers. We see that in all of our studies. So I guess I'm very interested to know how we could support that. And I really liked, Vanessa, what you touched on is how do you bring operational excellence to these social enterprises? Because you often see them struggling, going through a hard time. So I'd like to learn how I could support them um, through this, through dialogue and through, I guess, some takeaways. Thanks.
excellent. Thank you. Yeah,
Hi, I'm Angela Smith. I am a volunteer board member with the Albert County Historical Society. We operate the Albert County Museum in Hopewell Cape. Um, and that, I guess, is a social enterprise in a way, as a not-for-profit. Today, I'm looking for ideas for revenue generation. We always need to do more. We can do lots of activities that don't generate revenue, but we need to do some things that do generate revenue. So I'm hoping there'll be some ideas and some a little bit more understanding of what resources and tools are available out there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
I'll
I'd
go
like to go next.
ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I heard
I can
people,
go
but I don't
ahead.
know who it was. Yeah, go ahead, Pascal.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Pascal Haché. I'm actually a for-profit enterprise that we're just beginning, but we're gonna help a lot of municipalities and to kind of put structure and help guide them to see how they can professionalize and digitalize, kind of move into a more structured way. So I wish to be the bridge in between and help community organizations and others thrive. I was most recently a president of the Shack Lobster Festival for the past 6 years, which has grown, and we've involved a lot of community groups, and we've made a community event a lot larger by making partnerships with Cafe or other groups in the region to kind of give an event back to the people and make sure that people were part of it. So wearing a couple of hats, but today it's mostly to understand the realities, what's out there for our possible clients down the road, and how we can help them and better guide them. So thank you.
Yeah, and I always like to think of the example of, like Moncton developing Avenir Center or Fredericton developing the Fredericton Convention Center, right? Which are, municipal infrastructure that helps create tourism, revenue generating, all these kinds of things. So yeah, for sure, there's lots of ideas within municipalities as well to as social enterprise. There, I know Pascal and I didn't catch the pronunciation of your name. With the town of Riverview.
Kavya.
Kavya?
Yeah, good.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next because I think there may be a bridge there. Oh, and Jiren, if that's okay. Okay, wonderful. So for those of you who missed it, Christinella with the Southeast Regional Service Commission, I'm on the Community and Social Development team. My colleague Alexandra and I have the joy of being often the first point of contact within the Southeast Regional Service Commission when people want support. And people, I keep it generic because nonprofits would typically reach out more to me. For profit would be reaching out to my colleague Alexandra. And I know we have people from government here, towns. Either way, if you got in touch with either one of us, we would have a discussion with you and make sure that you're speaking to the right person. You can always reach out to me first and I can connect you to my colleague Alexandra if that's best. But what am I or what am I hoping to get out of today's session? I'm hoping to not only have you guys learn from Vanessa, but I'm also hoping to have you understand that the Southeast Regional Service Commission can be a bridge builder to the right connections. So connecting to Vanessa, connecting to certain other businesses, other nonprofits within the region. And so really helping you understand that you're not in anything alone. My team happens to have a database of funding possibilities. And so sometimes, when you look at social enterprises, we have specific funding for that. For other projects, we have other sources of funding. We don't host those funds. We just have a database of sources of funding, just to be clear. And we love to curate grant lists for people. And so my idea is not only to make sure that you're clear on what Pondish Pondé does in social enterprise, but also you knowing how we can support you in that journey so that you know that you are definitely not alone. And it's
Love
lovely
that.
to see everybody here. So, Jérôme, off to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So, Shireen Rebsho. I live in Dieppe. I'm a longtime federal public servant with a lot of experience in Indigenous affairs. Currently, senior advisor, Indigenous affairs and governance. A long time passionate person around human rights, peace building, wellness, all those things. And so with all the shifts in the federal government and also my own just life journey and experience, I'm thinking more and more about entrepreneurship, starting something. And so I recently started the Women Entrepreneurship 101 training with the women in business in New Brunswick. And this just popped up on my screen, and I just happened to be off today, like a winter wellness day, and this showed up. So it's perfect. I'm looking for the connections. And as a federal public servant, long time regionally, but also a lot of national functions as well. I'm a connector and I like to find resources for people. And now I find myself being the one who's looking for resources. So thank you for this opportunity. And I'm listening with a lot of interest and will be following up to see what the resources are. Thanks.
Thank you. And we have two more folks. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Christine. I think I got this email from Christine. I did get a couple of emails from the organization, so I was wondering, okay, I didn't know what to expect anyway. But I always love when I have to learn things. So my name is Fida Shogbo. I'm the Executive Director of Pure Gold Foundation. Pure Gold Foundation is a community-based program for youth. So we do a lot of work around youth empowerment, equipping youth in the community, making them better people. So that's what we do. And currently we are a registered charity and we're looking to dive into social enterprise model because of like Angela said, we do a lot of programs, but getting the fund is very, 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 very difficult. Very difficult. And the program we do is in high demand because we have more youth than we can even bargain for. Everybody wants to be part of the program because it's very beneficial. But again, we do a lot of things based on our passion. We get stressed out. We get to do a lot of work on the volunteer basis. Nobody's paid, but we want to get into the social enterprise model where we can reach more people, have the capacity in terms of personnel and all of those things really. And so I'm happy to be here to learn and even to connect. I hear Pascal say you're that bridge. I'm happy to connect with you, Pascal, and as many people that can tell me how to get the funding and how to make our organization bigger than before. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'll go next or last. So my name's Emily Scott. I'm with the Provincial Department of Social Development. And the reason I say that is because there is the Social Development section of the Regional Service Commission. So just wanted to clarify that. I guess in a way, I'm coming from a different perspective in the sense that what I look when I look at social enterprise, by the way, I get very excited about it. I've already spoken with Vanessa before about it. Um, when I look at social enterprise, I see it as a way to meet the needs of our clients. So I work specifically with the population that receives social assistance benefits. And I don't know if you're aware, but when a person is deemed employable and they come and apply for assistance, we actively work with them to develop action plans to help them get back into the workforce as quickly as possible, or to enter the workforce for the first time, if that is their situation. So we have people that are kind of all along the continuum as far as their employability and their readiness for employment. And so my job, I'm a regional services coordinator, and my job is twofold. One is to just make sure that our case managers who are working with our clients and developing case plans with them, that they're aware of the services that are out in the community that can serve the different needs of their clients. That's one of my jobs is so a big part of my job is just networking and knowing what's going on in the community. And the second part of my job is more on the procurement side. So um, if we identify a need that isn't presently being met, then it's my job to kind of do the footwork and try to get those services into place. And I certainly see social enterprise as a great opportunity for meeting the kinds of needs that we have for our clients. And we have a wide variety of needs within our clientele. So yes, I guess today I was looking at it. I didn't really know what to expect either, to be honest. Um, so as I'm, obviously there's going to be some connecting going on, and that's right up my alley. It's just all about networking, getting to know people, getting to know what people have to offer, what their strengths are, that kind of thing. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome, thank you. And Janet, I know you just joined, but we were just doing a round of introductions, so I know you missed most of them, but I'd love to hear a bit about, I guess, what brought you here today, and if you're representing an organization, what that is.
Hi there, it's Janet. My last name is Clouston. I'm here on the Bay of Fundy Coast in Hopewell Cape. I'm with the Albert County Historical Society and Museum. So the museum is in Hopewell Cape, and it's also the Prime Minister R.B. Bennett Center. And we're a nonprofit, but the museum itself is a bit of a social enterprise business entity. And revenue is important, but so is social development. It's part of our, building community and being an important part of the region here. And so I'm on the call today to learn a bit more about the social enterprise of what we do and how we can make the biggest impact.
Love it. Thanks, everyone. That was great. Thanks for sharing your different organizations and different insights. I'm just going to share my screen here. Just let me see. Oh, you're seeing my desktop, I think. I have a couple of screens, so just a second here. There we go. That's the right one. I just got back from some travel, so I'm apparently still having some jet lag. So yeah, so as I mentioned, we are at the Pond Deshpande Center, which is a center based at the University of New Brunswick. It was started by Jerry Pond and Desh Deshpande. So Jerry was the previous CEO of NBTEL, then went on to create a lot of innovation through mostly private sector innovation, but also really believes in the social side of that as well. And he was instrumental in helping set up the Economic and Social Inclusion Corporation. And then Desh Deshpande, like Jerry, also comes from a telecom background, originally from India, studied at UNB, went on to Queens, now lives in Boston. And so he's created a network of Deshpande foundations across the world, all focused on innovation, but innovation in a different way. Innovation in the sense of he has different approaches for people who have disposable income versus those that don't. And so actually, not next week, but the week after in rural India, he's running, it's called the Development Dialogues, and it's really around, what does innovation, or part of it is around what does innovation look like for, those who are really don't have disposable income. So both innovators from both a public or sort of a social and private sector point of view. For the last number of years, we've been running an initiative called Social Enterprise New Brunswick, which is supported by ESIC, the Economic and Social Inclusion Corporation. And so really, like in their previous plan, ESIC was focused on supporting nonprofits to develop social enterprise. And so some of you directly mentioned, I'm with a nonprofit, we need to do revenue generating activities. And, we're hearing that more and more from nonprofits. So we were really supporting nonprofits to develop ways to use revenue generating activities as part of their sustainability plan. Right now, we're doing more training this year on what is social enterprise as we continue to kind of think through like what's possible. And one thing that I'll mention on that is ESIX also, as part of their new plan, supporting the development of what we're loosely calling now a nonprofit advisory council. And so the goal of that is to say, you know, what would be the benefit of if nonprofits, the community sector, of which social enterprise is a component, what would be the benefit of having a representative, a body that represents us to government, represents us in general, and like what would we do with that? And so that's kind of the guiding question for that committee that ESIC's also supporting, and I am sitting on that as well. So throughout this, if you have any questions, I invite you to put them in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on that. And then if I don't see it and you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. And for sure, I will see that because I have my slides over here, but I'm seeing you here. So I will see it. If you raise your hand, it kind of pops you up to the top. So our land acknowledgement, because UNB is based primarily, as I'm sure you know, in Fredericton and St. John, although we do have a nursing campus here in Moncton. At UNB, we respectfully acknowledge that UNB stands on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the traditional Wolastoqey land. And the lands of the Wabanaki people are recognized in a series of peace and friendship treaties to establish an ongoing relationship of peace, friendship, and mutual respect between equal nations. And so, as Christine mentioned, today, many or most of us are in Moncton, which is Mi'kmaq territory. And of course, we also acknowledge that. So as I mentioned, this work has been supported by ESIC, the Economic and Social Inclusion Corporation, and this has been a part of their last strategic plan as well as their current one. So this is me. I'm serving as the executive director of the Pondish Bonde Center, and as I mentioned, I'm actually co-chairing the nonprofit advisory council, of which social economy is a component. And I'm co-facilitating today. My colleague Jose Ryu Walker is in the other breakout room. She's an associate with Pondish Bonde Center at UNB. She has a long career in economic development in New Brunswick, and she has a consulting business, and she's also serving as the deputy mayor of Grand Falls. So I feel like she has a really good also background of, municipal understanding, municipal governance, economic development, as well as the social economy. So I heard a bit about what everybody wants to learn about social enterprise in this session. So what we're going to do for this session is I'll take you through basically like 10 components for the structure of this session. At the end, we also have on our website, we have a toolkit that I'll put the link for. You're welcome to download that. It's available in English and French. And then we also have a report that's calling for a bit more structure for social enterprise in New Brunswick. But of course, I'd like to start with, of course, what is social enterprise? So social enterprise, and one of the top questions we often get, like, is it like something I can register? So I'm not a lawyer, so I can't provide legal advice, but we do acknowledge that social enterprise isn't a legal structure in New Brunswick. So there are in different provinces, different types of corporations you can register. So someone here mentioned that they have a registered charity, which is a specific type of nonprofit corporation. You can also have a nonprofit that is cooperative. And these are all just different types of corporations, right? Social enterprise isn't a corporate structure that you can register in New Brunswick. Social enterprise is really about using market tools to create impact which then means, it's about how do you make governance decisions in the way that you invest surplus or margin in creating that impact that you want to have. So really it's about how you're running the organization, regardless of what legal structure it is. And so I like this graphic. It's from Social Enterprise Ontario. And so here they have, the Venn diagram of the public sector, private and civil society organizations. I like to think of these as community sector organizations. So we have social economy businesses. So these are ones that, are privately held, but they're really working in a social way. Sometimes you might have heard people register what's called a B corporation or a benefit corporation. It's basically like a vetting process and a certification that you get for saying like my business actually follows the values that I'm marketing that I say I have. As we talked about a little bit, we also know that communities, community economic development, like things like the Avenir Center in Moncton. I mean, that's just one example. There's, of course, many more. And then we have public sector nonprofits who are working also in the market. And so, they might have a coffee shop, or I know that there's one in St. John. They actually just, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, they registered a plumbing business. And so it's owned by a charity. They do plumbing services, and they hire people with barriers to employment. And so that's how they directly meet this is like the social mission that we're trying to do. We're providing a service in the market, but all of the surplus is actually being directed to the training that we do aside from that. And I saw someone had something in the comments here. Just let me check that out. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Does a social enterprise have to be careful not to compete with for-profit business limitations? So I think you'll find if you go for provincial support from a body like ACOA or the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, ACOA wouldn't necessarily fund a nonprofit to compete with a private sector business because it's not in their mandate. That's not to say that money doesn't exist to support social enterprise to do that. And so one of the things I encourage people to do is follow the Social Finance Fund. They're generally not investing directly into organizations, although they have done some. Recently, I talked to a Manitoba social enterprise who has like a white labeled service that they're selling to government, and basically a venture capital fund did invest in them. And so I think like the thing, and out of the 10 things, my last one was mindset shifts. One of them is thinking about capital as a tool. And so it's like, of course, even in the private sector, you go to a thing and, people just kind of, move you around, and there's no like, I go to this person and I get like a super direct answer and have all my problems solved. Like, I don't think that you'll find that happens. But I think there is the need to be flexible in your thinking about money. There's grants, but there's also different types of loans. Equity is of course a bit more difficult because sometimes the payback period is a bit longer. But I would say the only time where it's like not compete, I think it's really like if you're going to someone like ACOA and asking them to support your social enterprise. That's not to say I haven't seen ACOA support social enterprise, because I have. I think it's really about the pitch and how does it fit in and can you kind of customize it and things like that. It's a good question and one that we've certainly heard a lot. So we built a table here, which is around social enterprise. What we think of, we call it like traditional business, and this would just be like a traditional interpretation of business, I think would be how I would say that. Um, the purpose and goals, of course, of social enterprise is to address a social and environmental issue by creating meaningful and sustainable impact. A traditional business is around generating profit and financial success. And so that's not to say that profit and financial success doesn't have a social component, because I think it does. But it's just more about like it's not addressing a specific social issue that's not about, um, generating employment and things like that. Impact and innovation, creating solutions to social and environmental problems that go beyond typical market-driven innovation, whereas a traditional business is creating innovative products or services that appeal to the market, and again, the primary driver is generating revenue. In social enterprise, there's generally a wider range of stakeholders, including local community, NGOs, government, and potentially other social enterprise. Whereas a traditional business, they're prioritizing the interests of shareholders and their customers. In terms of measuring success, of course, success is measured in part by, and with social enterprise, I typically like to use the word surplus instead of profit, because you have to cover your revenue. Because I could make $1 million, but spend $1.5 million, and I'm still not making any money, right? I'm losing money. So you have to have a surplus above what you're spending in order to make it make sense. And so social enterprise really about, how do we do that? How do we create surplus while also creating social impact, improving well-being of community and the environment that the social enterprise is serving? Whereas again, like a traditional interpretation of a business is really around financial performance, market share, and profitability. And so one of the key things to all enterprise is risk. One of the things that we're seeing right now is, in a riskier business environment, and an enterprise environment that has a lot of unknowns. So it makes it harder to take additional risk. But as I'm sure we're seeing, many organizations that continue to take risk, and these times that we're in are often when we see social enterprise take even greater risk to address complex social and environmental problems, because as you know, we have a lot of emerging issues as a result of what's happening on a global scale right now. Whereas the traditional business, again, they're taking also calculated risks, but with a focus on mitigating potential loss while maximizing the long-term gains. So just again, social enterprise isn't a legal structure. You can be a nonprofit, a charity being a type of nonprofit, a cooperative. You can have a for-profit cooperative or a nonprofit cooperative. You can have a B Corp, which is a certification of a for-profit. You could be a traditional for-profit, or you can be hybrid in the sense that sometimes what a nonprofit that's competing in the market might do is, after they test their concept, the market, and if that competes with, or like it might not fit exactly in the objects or mission of the nonprofit organization, they might register a for-profit corporation that's owned by the nonprofit. And so, you have to get a lawyer once it gets to this level of complexity. And generally, people don't do that until it's needed. You don't need that to start. But it is part of like risk mitigation in the long term as social enterprises start to grow. So as a nonprofit becomes more and more mature, and maybe they're running a social enterprise, they're likely to at some point take that out of the traditional operations and have it be its own thing. And then whoever is running that presents the results to the board of the nonprofit. So the term social enterprise really describes the intent and the model, not your incorporation status. And because of this, funders, lenders, and investors don't always know where you fit, which I think goes back to your question, Angela, of like, does it have to be careful not to compete with for-profit business? I think like when unless it's a specific like this is a fund where we're funding social enterprise, you have to be very clear to and try to not confuse people because of that. So the key takeaway, flexibility is a strength, but it can also create confusion at times. And so this is one, and I apologize that it's a bit grainy, but they had taken it off of online, but I had luckily a version of it because it's my favorite visual that I've seen of the business spectrum model. In the middle, you'll see what's known as like impact investing or social enterprise. But if we start here, we know like in a traditional business, the primary driver is to achieve financial value, such as a traditional business, a pure profit orientation with mainstream investors. We're seeing a lot right now. I mean, really, there's a bit of move away from corporate social responsibility in the US, but I would say not necessarily globally. But the next kind of like move over from that is what's known as CSR, corporate social responsibility, corporate philanthropy. Often larger corporations have foundations like have the MasterCard Foundation or Canadian Tire has a foundation and they're have a specific giving focus. On the far other side, we have a traditional charity where their primary driver is to achieve social value. And so this is very different. It's not about financial value, but about social value. And purely charitable funding generally comes from grants, donations, or endowments. And so a foundation is a type of charity. And so, there's lots of charities. Within Canada, a charity has to do a certain type of thing. Like not all nonprofit activities are eligible for charitable status, but having charitable status gives you the ability to write charitable donation receipts and things like that. As we move away from that and into the center, we have organizations that have additional market-based revenue streams, which is a bit what we talked about already. And then as we move into this center part here, we have social business where profits are reinvested. We have mission-driven for-profits like B Corps. B Corps, again, it's a certification status. And then we have nonprofits over here, which are getting close to being self-sustaining, where over something like 75% of their revenues are market-driven, but they're still primarily delivering social value. So they're achieving measurable social impact alongside financial return. Recently, our one of our benefactors, Jerry Pond, he was telling me that his biggest return last year was it was a business, a for-profit business, but they actually had a social mission. And so, he was like, I for sure believe that you can have social impact and financial return because I've seen it. And I think these types of things are starting to happen more and more as people like free up their mindset from being like either black or white, like I'm doing a business or I'm doing a charity. And like people are doing a lot of this blended stuff in here right now, which I think is, for me, super exciting. So, a few examples again. You can have a social enterprise that's operated by a charity or nonprofit. A good example of this is Habitat for Humanity's Restore. And so, this actually, the first restore was in the prairies in Canada. And so they're like, we need to generate some additional revenue. They ask for donations for like building materials and then they sell them. And so it was such a successful model that it's now spread to Habitat for Humanities all across North America, actually. Another great example is the YMCA. I recently joined the YMCA here in Moncton, and they're running 2 gyms in Moncton. They have an app, they have a ton of services. So they're doing really like community programming, but they're also selling a membership. So they're competing in the market. You know, would I rather join the Y or Good Life? For me, I'd rather join the Y because I know that any of the surplus is going to support programming. There's also a form of social enterprise. You may or may not have heard this term, employment-based social enterprise, which is when the social aspect of the enterprise is about hiring people that have barriers to employment. So Promo Heroes is one that's run by a charity based in St. John, and they actually have multiple types of social enterprise. They hire well, their main mandate is around supporting adults with intellectual disabilities, and so they're Promo Heroes. They run a swag shop. You could order like 20 sweaters that are branded with your logo, and they make that there. They're the ones that I mentioned that also started plumbing business. They're like, okay, we need more places to hire people, and they're like, okay, we know the trades are in huge demand. So they're like, let's try one. And so they started this plumbing service, and like within a month, they're like fully booked, right? So they're being very innovative around thinking like, okay, this is our mandate. We need to provide employment. Providing the employment is only part of what they do. They do a lot of other things, but they've been very creative in thinking about how to, yeah, are you? That's great. I'm glad to hear that. There's also social purpose business. I always use Patagonia as a great example because they're literally $1 billion corporation, globally known. They're not like what they sell isn't social in and of itself. They sell apparel, but how they operate the business, the mindset that they have, their governance is social because what they do is they say, okay, like, we're going to do the very hard work of ensuring our supply chains are ethical, that they are sustainable, don't damage the environment. And all of that is not easy. And then, so as you may have heard, they also a couple years ago have moved basically like it being managed, and where a lot of the I don't know whether to call it profit or surplus, but let's call it profit, is going into actually environmental conservation and stewardship. And so this is an example of a business that's selling something that's not social apparel, but are making all of their decisions in a very social way. There's also member-owned cooperatives like INI, and then another one actually that I don't put on here, but we all know as New Brunswickers would be MetaV, which is again providing a service, but that many people need and use, but is doing it in a way that is a nonprofit. So the key characteristics are that it exists to serve a social or environmental problem, prioritize people, purpose, planet over profit in operational and strategic decisions. So again, like out of everything we've gone through so far, like I do want to highlight the operational and strategic decisions. Like this is the key thing. Like how we make the decisions is really what makes the social enterprise. Um, has a self-sustaining revenue model in the sense that, you know, it has to be creating enough surplus to make it make sense, but also reinvest the majority of the surplus towards its purpose. Um, and then the structure is about choosing legal structures and financing, but also governance decisions that protect and lock in purpose in the long term. And so why do social enterprises matter now? As we all know, there's affordability pressures, care and service gaps, workforce participation challenges, which potentially is about to get even more challenging. We know that there's climate and local resiliency challenges, as well as challenges in community wealth building and ownership. I read this stat the other day. It was something like, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was something like 1% of the world owns like 70% of the wealth. And so, you know, I think some of these conflicts that are happening are around like how can we redistribute some of that. So the key takeaway is that local problems really need locally anchored solutions, and that's really where I think social enterprise can play a huge role. So I talked about this a bit already, but an example of a nonprofit with multiple social enterprises that focuses on workforce inclusion is Key Industries, which is in St. John. Their first social enterprise was Promo Heroes, which is the swag and gift shop. They also run a communications firm, and their latest one was plumbing. So again, saw an opportunity. Like we know trades is super in demand, so let's go there. Social enterprise also focuses on having what we like to call a triple bottom line. So it's has commercial viability. So it has like what's sometimes called product market fit. So there's a product or a service and a market that needs it or is willing to buy it, but also has a social and environmental purpose and community or place-based outcomes. So really in the triple bottom line, if one side fails, the model struggles. So if we become too focused on one or the other, it kind of weakens that three-legged stool. So again, here a good example is affordable housing. So Habitat for Humanity, we know that they're building houses and making that a lot more affordable for people. But in order to enable that, they also do a restore where they're selling used construction materials to help other people make their own renovations or home building, whatever it might be also more affordable. Kaleidoscope Social Impact is really like one of the only what I would call like social finance funders in New Brunswick. They're not a funder in the sense of they're not providing grants, but they do have different capital options, things like loans. Right now, they're focused on bridging the capital gap for affordable housing development. So if you know anyone or are doing any affordable housing development, that's where they're focused now, but they do have other products focused on generally they have options like if you have a loan, you might take a loan in your social enterprise and the payback terms, instead of it being like every month I'm going to pay back $1,000, it's they have different terms, like they're more willing to do things like sales-based repayment. So, you know, maybe I'm paying back my loan based on 10% of my sales every month. And so it's a bit more flexible than traditional financial products. Social enterprises, as we had talked about, can also build municipal triple bottom lines. And so I think the Avenir Center is a great example, the Fredericton Convention Center. And so these are kind of like a life of their own, but they do bring in revenue for the whole community. So the New Brunswick context, also important to mention, we have small markets. So as we all know, like New Brunswick, there's not a ton of us around, but um, one thing to think about is, what can we sell to the people that are immediately here? And then also, how can we look around to sell to others? And that might be online, um, might be neighboring provinces, might be tourism related, like whatever it is, how can we start to think about, especially if we're living in a small community, how can we broaden the market? Who are the other markets that are out there? We know we have tight networks and a relational economy. So if we acknowledge that that's true, how can we leverage that as a strength where community trust is currency? And so actually in the ESIC, when they were preparing their current plan, I think they collected something like 40,000 pieces of feedback. And what they found is that of all the institutions, organizations like nonprofits had the highest community trust. And so what that means is like social enterprise, especially if it's run by a nonprofit, it can actually build community trust more quickly than potentially um, some for-profits. Place-rooted solutions often scale differently, so they might make different decisions. So it's kind of a balance, right? It's like small size can make us fast learners, but can sometimes limit revenue. Doesn't have to be true, but how can we kind of think creatively about what are the constraints that are true if we think about New Brunswick in general, but then our community. And then how can we start to think about those creatively? And if you do use AI, I find AI is a good thinking partner on those types of things. If you give it like, these are all my constraints, help me think through some ideas to help me get, you know, 20 new ideas. I find it can help quite quickly on those types of questions. Um, so a good example in terms of like the community vibe. 12 Neighbors was started by someone who exited a large tech company, wanted to give back in terms of the wealth that he created. And so he spent, I think it was something like a year listening to people who were experiencing housing instability. And then based on that and with their feedback in partnership with people experiencing the problem, he developed what they're calling 12 Neighbors. So it's a dignified tiny home community in Fredericton. And as you can see here, it might be a bit small, but it says where housing is just the start. And so they have now they have a cafe on site, and they build the houses on site and sell them and things like that. So there's like the housing is the main thing, providing the dignified housing. But there's, it's kind of grown more than that, or bigger than that, I should say. In terms of rural innovation, Project Village, which is run by ECW, it's called Eastern Charlotte Waterways. So this is an example. This is pulled from their website. So they started in fall 2020. And so what they did was, they said, okay, like, how can we use social enterprise to help in some of the community challenges that we had? Because I don't know if you remember, but it was a while ago, and their grocery store had closed, so they made a bid to buy the grocery store, and so they wanted to turn that into I'm gonna say greenhouse, but that's not the right word. It's like basically like an indoor, like a hydroponics, basically, where they're growing herbs to sell to local restaurants and things like that. Um, which aligns to because they're like, where do we come from? It was around like biology, environmental conservation, things like that. They purchased an electric fleet. They were doing a car sharing program. Did some interested in community housing and things like that. So they kind of they started again at like, we're the stewards of the waterway. And from there, they're like, okay, like what can we also do that's social enterprise related, um, that still serves our mission, but is more innovative, does more than, than what we thought possible. And in terms of funding this, like they didn't go and apply to a fund and get all the money. It didn't work that way. They worked closely with their elected representatives. They did a lot of advocacy and pitching. They managed to get investment across multiple departments, but that does take a lot of time, right? It takes vision and time, and I've been very impressed with the work of ECW. There's also co-ops focused on food security. So not too far outside of Moncton, we have Ferme Terre Partager, which is a cooperative. Maybe some of you buy the food boxes in the summer, but I think this is a great example of a cooperative model that's working well, and is focused on food security. There's also bulk food buying clubs. So I know that this is just one example, but they have these across New Brunswick. Community Food Smart. So this is one by Greater Fredericton Social Innovation, where they're doing a bulk food buying club for individuals, um, purchasing quality and fruit and vegetables at affordable prices. And so they would buy the food and bag it and then sell it at much lower price than what you would get at something like the grocery store. So to go back to the question we had earlier, and I think it's an important question, why funding is hard. So I do think it's important to acknowledge that. I'll start with the key takeaway, which is like the model doesn't fit in the existing boxes. And so that makes it hard, but it also makes it exciting, right? So you don't fit squarely in philanthropy because it's maybe too business-like. You maybe don't fit squarely in commercial investment because you're too mission-driven. And so how do you pitch it? How do you kind of get the right in between? How do you get people to buy in? And it is possible because I've seen it, and I've seen it in New Brunswick. Um, Governments often fund programs on enterprises. And so how do you think about that? And traditional banks do assess risk differently than like someone who's funding community finance or blended finance or social finance. You might see some of these terms as you start to look through finance options. Actually, just before I move on from that, I do think it's important to say that these are great. There's options, but it is difficult, but it's possible, and I do believe that it's. I think it's a challenge of not giving up, right? It's like believing so much in your vision that you're just not going to say no. And the deeper I get into this work, the more amazing success stories I hear. So the last community economic impact, community sector economic impact report in New Brunswick was from 2021. A lot has changed since 2021, but the report said that the community sector in New Brunswick, and I like to provide this in case it's helpful in your own pitching, 3.7 billion in direct annual GDP contributions, almost a billion of value and economic value of volunteering, and over 55,000 employment positions. So it does, the community sector does have economic impact. We did a survey in 2021 as well. We're about to start a campaign on our social media with insights comparing a survey we did in 2021 to 2024, focused specifically on social enterprise. And so 20% of social enterprise that we surveyed in 2021 is generating over $250,000 in New Brunswick. So I think that's really like not something to to ignore, right? It's not, a huge number, but it is starting to get significant. And so, now how do we give them the support to continue to grow and thrive? Over 60% are seeking capital to grow their social enterprise. And so they do want to grow. But again, going back to this capital insight, it's, there's not necessarily always the capital options that are easy to access. And so it does take more time investment to find the right capital. So the financing reality is that viability of the social enterprise often requires a mix of financing options, not a single source. So we have a limited philanthropic ecosystem, we have fewer social finance instruments, but if you start to look outside of New Brunswick, it starts to broaden the pie. Loan readiness can be uneven. Although it's good to start to ask if you are looking at loans or equity, it's great to ask it before you're ready, because you need to know how to get ready. You need to know what the criteria are for getting the financing or funding in order to start to get ready, because sometimes it takes a year or two to really get there. Procurement as a tool is underused. And so how do you help whoever it is that's you've identified that could procure what you're doing as a tool for revenue? And community bonds are emerging, but slowly. And this would be like a way to, for let's say government to buy an outcome, but do it through a specific type of vehicle. In New Brunswick, we do have a CEDC, just going back to the legal structure part. So this is an option. You can register a CDC, stands for Community Economic Development Corporation and Cooperative. So a CDC is a small business in New Brunswick that raises funds by selling shares to, by basically like selling shares to people. And so that is, I mentioned social enterprise wasn't something you can register, but we do have this as a legal vehicle if you are thinking about raising funds, as something that you can potentially look into. And the source here is Financial and Consumer Services New Brunswick. They have really great resources on their website. So the capital stack is a word that you probably hear more from private business, but I do think it's important for social enterprise to understand that as well. And so, where you are when you're generating $250,000, $500,000, $1 million is different than where you're starting. So, when you're starting, probably looking at grants. As you grow, loans, you can have revenue-based financing. So you can have a loan that's based on revenue, contracts. So like selling agreements, investment when appropriate. This is investment, equity-based investments, more of once you're very mature. Or community bonds. So just want to provide different types of option as you think it through. These are some existing, I guess I'd call them programs or organizations that you could look into. So right now, CBDC does have a social enterprise loan. But CBDC Schiller is also running what they call the social economy pilot project. And so they do have funds for social enterprise and its grants. I will say that they have a very limited size, like they don't have a ton of funds. So if you are interested in that, I encourage you to check that out as soon as possible. Kaleidoscope Social Impact also has some options. ACOA has their Innovative Communities Fund, and they also have a business development program, which is more focused on helping businesses grow. And I think ACOA has really like amazing terms in terms of getting like in terms of financing or financing terms, I guess I would say. Not easy to get them, but if you get them, they have really good terms. I did mention the Social Finance Fund. And so social finance is growing, I would say, in Canada. The Social Finance Fund was announced a couple of years ago. And so basically, Canada announced a Social Finance Fund, the Government of Canada. Their move money through three primary intermediaries: BOAN, Social Impact, Realized Capital Partners, and then Cap Finance is really focused in Quebec. But these two, I would say, like, even if you may not be ready for anything like that, I would say, these are great people for you to follow either on their newsletters or on social media. They're both doing, I would say that they have a slightly different feel, but they're both doing really cool stuff. So the success factors. So, does the social enterprise have a clear problem and a validated need? As I mentioned with the plumbing business, they're like, okay, we know trades are needed. We want to hire people with barriers to employment, and so they had a clear problem and a validated need. Are there defined beneficiaries and customers? So, in terms of a beneficiary, that might be different than the customer. Customer is someone who's paying. The beneficiary might be different. I know for a while it was pretty common for there to be like, if I buy a pair of shoes, someone in need gets a pair of shoes, like that type of thing. That could be an example of where there's a defined beneficiary and customer that are different. You often want to work with trusted partners, either in marketing or in different ways. How do you develop and grow a realistic revenue strategy? Because you have to lock in social as part of your social enterprise, governance is something that's very important. And impact measurement can be important in measuring your non-financial returns. And you want it to be credible, but lightweight. What we mean here is just like you don't want to do something that's so complicated that only one person can do it. So the key takeaway is strategy beats passion. Obviously, you have to have passion, but then you have to be able to then go out and execute it, because the vision is the starting point, and then you have to go do it and I see there's some questions. I'll get to that. I'll just finish this and then get to the questions as well. So the mindset shift is, how do you move from a charity mindset? And I'm not saying a charity mindset is bad. I don't believe that. I do believe in charitable work, but what I mean here is in the social enterprise context. How do you move from I'm giving away, or I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart because it is the right thing to do, and often it is, to a value creation mindset? Last year at our social enterprise conference, I guess it would be about a year and a half ago, we brought in someone from Manitoba, and he was like, people are just giving away their outcomes. And so his point was, how how do we like get value, money for the outcomes that social enterprise is creating, because those are of huge, huge value. How do you move from a 1 year program to a multi-year solution? How do you move from going it alone to always working in partnership and serving quietly to demonstrating impact publicly, right? Because how do you, especially if it's a market, you're selling using market tools for impact, how are you always telling people what you're doing? And there's so many fun ways to do marketing these days that I think the world is your oyster. And so social enterprise really is a model for resilience and not a buzzword. So I really think the mindset shift is a big one. So this is just an overview of what we went through. So this is just the last thing I want to mention before we get to questions and discussions. We're hosting a social enterprise excellence symposium in May, so May 20th, 21st. I feel like my colleague maybe just changed those dates. I'll have to check that. I have to send you guys a follow-up anyway, because the tickets aren't open. We have a what do you call it, expression of interest form. We tried to get the tickets through Eventbrite, but because we're based at the university, Eventbrite has made it now extremely difficult for us to use their platform, so we can't anymore. So we're just having to build a bespoke registration page behind the scenes, but I'm hoping that will be ready by Monday. So I should be able to follow up with you with the registration link if you're interested, but it'll be at the Santé Arts et de la Culture in Dieppe. So we hope to join you and encourage you to join our newsletter or follow us on social media for tickets to that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so I can see the questions and all of you. I have a little pop-up window here. Okay, and Faith, you said, please share the contact for, is it Promo Heroes? Yeah, okay. If you look at, let me just, gosh, what did I, key industries, sorry. As I mentioned, I'm still having a little bit of jet lag. My brain is not working as quickly as I want it to be. Yes, and so Angela, community bonds, it's a great question. And I'm wondering if FCNB has a good resource on that so you can read about it. I don't see one. I'm going to send a link to here, which is, I think this is a great organization to follow anyway. They're called Tapestry. Tapestry Community Capital. So that this is their link specifically on community bonds, but it's basically like a social finance tool that's used by generally nonprofits. Interest-bearing loan from an investor that has a set rate of return and a fixed term. So it's not quite the same. I'm trying to think if I could think of an example. The example that's coming to mind is right now, it's not exactly a community bond, but in Alberta, I'm following an organization where the government of Alberta invested money from their budget that was supporting refugees that were on social assistance. And they said, okay, like, obviously, we want to support refugees on social assistance, but we also want them to find meaningful employment. And so what they did was they invested 3 years of that budget line, let's say, in an organization. And that organization is still paying people who have arrived in Canada with refugee status in terms of providing social assistance, but then they're also providing training, employment training to be able to help them find meaningful employment. And so that would be an example of at the end of this period, we want to have this outcome. That wouldn't, the financial return, which is why it's not exactly a community bond, is not like the financial return to the government is that it decreases the burden on that budget line. But generally, I think community bonds would, the easiest examples to understand would probably be in, I would say, housing developments. So it'd be like, maybe I'm going to raise $1 million through community bonds to build community housing. And then, of course, like, you're charging rent and things like that. So you might be able to pay back a fixed return over a fixed term. So maybe it's 1 million over whatever X period. So it's kind of serving like a mortgage, but it's not meeting the same. It's not the same as like if you were investing like if you were a financial investor investing in traditional mortgages or anything like that. Um, how does a CEDC sell shares? This is a good question. One I don't really know the answer to. I only know really one person that has used this. And what they did, they obviously had they had to work with a lawyer to do this. But you had different, he had different share options. Like there were relatively smaller ones, let's say 1,000 or 5,000, I can't remember. And then he had bigger ones that he was selling at 25 or 50,000, and he was trying to raise, let's say, it was 500,000. And so he would have to have had a table that had like a share structure, the same as if you're selling equity in any sort of corporation. But it would have to be clear to me, like if I was buying this share and I'm not an accredited investor, and this is where there's like a lot under the hood of this because accredited investors are able to take more financial risk than people who aren't. And so I'm assuming there's different levels within that to be able to sell shares to accredited investors and non-accredited investors, but I'm not an expert on the CEDC. Um, there, the website is good, and they do have some videos in it, or on it, I should say. But I, I don't think it's necessarily like an easy journey. You know what I mean? I'm not sure though. I'm not an expert in it. Um, yeah, Janet, also a good question. How do we balance the work of social enterprise core mandate? I think that's like, the biggest question for a lot of people, especially as they're starting. I'm on the board of an organization that was looking at a social enterprise, and some of the board conversations sounded like we see this opportunity. We were lucky that over the course of the organizational history, we'd always been investing in a reserve fund. So part of the conversation was, could we take some of the reserve fund as this is a risk that we want to invest in as an organization and hire one person to then just be responsible for this. So that was one way that as a board we were talking about. We believe this is an important opportunity that aligns with our mission, but isn't our core charitable activity. So how do we kind of like carve that out to invest in it? And the way we were looking at that was carving off to hire someone. Some people do it as, I guess a lot of them start with like a off the side of the desk kind of thing, but it'd be, who's doing it? How how could you develop a I guess like a delineated test where it's like for 3 months we're gonna try this, and then we're all gonna come back and ask ourselves, did this work? What went wrong? What went right? And then like what are the lessons? And then based on those lessons, do we want to continue to try for another 3 months? And 3 months may be too long. I don't know. Like maybe it's a month and then we're going to come back and kind of see how it's going. But I think it'd be thinking about it as like what's a small enough like risk that we can take where it's not going to, you know, um, put our organization in a position we don't want to be in, but also gives this idea like a real chance to see if it's going to succeed.
Can I just bring up not in the chat, but so we run a museum,
Yeah,
Albert County Museum, and like a lot of museums and art centers, cultural centers have food and beverage operations. I mean, if you look at the recent redevelopment of the Beaverbrook Gallery and their
I love their
addition,
coffee shop.
right? That it's
Yeah,
so they have the whole redevelopment was to put a business unit in a
yeah,
store. Essentially, they've got their admissions office and their gift shop, and then they have this standalone cafe. People come in and have a coffee, and they leave without ever touring the gallery, or they include the gallery. So they've created a model. They invested in it. They had, I mean, Beaverbrook raises a lot of money, so good for them. So we go back and forth around this, like how do we add culinary and food and beverage, and do it in a sustainable way, but then also make sure it's profitable. And how many cups of coffee do we need to sell to make it worth opening a coffee can, even if because we have a large facility, right? And we have a lot of traffic on 114, and there's very little food and beverage in our area. And so we have a commercial kitchen. We have so many tools, but then it's saying, okay, we're adding another business unit. We're adding a sort of a for-profit, essentially business unit onto what we're already doing, and we're at capacity when it comes to the museum operations and running our current. So how do we do it in a way that's sustainable, but that we're not putting so much energy and effort into the food and beverage side of it, which is very labor intensive, and not really having the profit we're hoping, or it's mission drift, right? So we have all our volunteers, or because we've been around for quite some time. We've been operating as a museum since 1962, so we've gone through quite a few different models, and we're just wanting to make sure that the model we choose works. And so that's one example of a social enterprise that we could have out of our facility, and it really could help, or it could be kind of a distraction away from the services of our museum and our society as historic preservation. So that's an example.
I think that's a great example because it's like, I mean, and the Beaverbrook. So our office in Fredericton is at the Renaissance College campus. So we're like a few streets away from Beaverbrook. And there's tons of coffee shops in Fredericton, but I always go to the Beaverbrook because they have the best espresso. So you know what I mean? Like it's like no one else does espresso. They do it, but not well. So and I've been to a few museums in Toronto where, the museum has like better coffee than the coffee shops around it, right? And so like yours is obviously like a very like different example in Toronto because there's, it's in a rural environment, but in the summer there is like, as you pointed out, like you know, traffic in terms of like tourism, and people probably want to stop for a coffee, or and then maybe they check out the museum and maybe they don't, but either way, you're probably generating some revenue. So I think the question would be, if you bought one of those like espresso machines, I don't know how much that costs, I'm assuming a couple thousand. Um, then you need a staff person. Could you access one of those like under 30 programs for a summer to like get it going? And like the person you hire has to be really bubbly and friendly. And then if, and then you kind of see like this is our 2026 test. Like, does one coffee machine and a bubbly young person like help us kind of get there, and then if that's true, you know, what's next? Because it sounds like you do have the infrastructure to be able to start to take some more risks. How does that sound?
When do we get started? No, I mean it sounds
I want to come.
it sounds reasonable, a
Yeah.
couple of $1,000s for a good espresso machine, but we're also looking after expensive equipment and HVAC, climate control, and then we have a restoration project on one of our major buildings. And there's always kind of competing interests, not just with our brain space in terms of where the future goes, but in terms of where do we need financial support for which projects. And a lot of the money we're able to raise is flow through money. So we can get certain in the museum world, there's a fine balance. But then we would have a $2,000 espresso machine, which may or may not bring the revenue in, in the future. But I guess we'll let you know what happens when we see you in May, because we'll have decisions made by then.
Well, and if you'd like to have a separate chat, maybe the three of us could plan a call. I'm around next week. I'm away for the first 2 weeks of February, but otherwise, I'd be happy to do a bit of brainstorming with you because I think, it's a fairly small risk for potentially reward. And, like you said, if you have commercial kitchen, there's things that you can grow into.
We would
So
love that. Thank you. I'll be in touch.
yeah, really exciting. Pascal?
Hi, sorry, I'm way better at speaking than writing. I just
Yeah, no
wanted
worries.
to thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Janet. At this Sud-Est Lobster Festival, for us, it was tough during the years that as you start progressing and it starts growing, you want to have the community impact, you want to be accessible, you want people to feel like they're part of something, and it brings a lot of positive and good for the community in certain groups. And but there's always you need to be financially viable, right? So you've got that pressure of always being in grants are there, you've got partnerships, but at some point it's tough to manage that, that social impact that you're looking to have while trying to make it affordable and accessible to everyone, right? So I think it's a tough balance. So, Janet, a very interesting your point that you were saying. For me on my end is I realized that there was a lot of gaps for non-for-profits as I was on the board for the Maison de Nazareth, for Vestiaire Saint-Joseph in Chiliac. University of Moncton, we created a food bank when I was I've been in a lot of different sectors where I saw there was a big need for being a bit more, having access to professionalized help, and the money and the grants weren't always there. So for me, creating our business that is a for-profit with owners, and there's three of us, so I didn't know how we fell into the whole social aspect of it, but for us it's always been the impact. And I just like to have a comment on, if I'd be selling a chair and a table, the impact is somebody's going to be able to sit at the chair and use the table. For us, where we want to help communities and municipalities bridge the gap with helping the community-based organizations that are part of that municipality kind of work together and professionalize them and help them get those grants and getting access and the structures and everything. So can you maybe help me in framing my mind? And I don't believe my business is a social enterprise, but I think the impact is very social and so maybe, yeah, just get a comment from you on that end.
In terms of like how you could communicate the impact that you're having, is that kind of what you're saying?
My goal is not, yeah, obviously we want to pay the bills and everything, but it's very impact driven for us
Yeah.
having a contract where we can help a municipality help their organizations and then work together and help them grow and help them promote them. And so our impact is very community based, but we're also a for profit, so it's a bit tough to understand where we fall in all of this, right?
Yeah, like I think about yeah, because I'm wondering, do you know Stiletto Consulting?
I've heard the name actually, yeah.
Yeah, because they'd be like a consulting firm, but I feel like so on their website they do a good job of highlighting their case studies, and that might be a way of communicating your impact. Or you could say like, I don't know the specific outcome you're trying to get, but like I also follow Bloom funding, and they help people do like fundraising as well as shred credits. And so, like, some of their impact measurement would sound like, we've helped raise $100 million for organizations over the last 5 years. I don't know if those are their specific impacts. I'm just making up a number, but
Yeah.
like you could think about it in those types of things, and then that then helps you start to track what you want to understand, I suppose, from what your clients are doing. And I would guess that that might help you refine your offers as well.
Thank you. A lot of good information today, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Any other questions? Yeah.
And if I may, and if I understand correctly, what Pascal was saying as well, maybe if in your profit you keep a part like, to invest on this specific cause and to communicate that is also a way to do
Totally.
that. Yeah. Sometimes we don't think about it, but just to say a percentage of our profit, we decided to put it for a mission specific for the community. This is also social enterprise. So
Yeah, I think that's great. I know the Chapman Group, which is a HR consulting in St. John, they're a registered B Corp as well, and they have all of their staff give 1 day a month to a nonprofit. So they give their professional services away for free to community organizations 1 day a month, and that's how they have like operationalized their impact. So yeah, I think there's like tons of options.
Well, thank you, and I think it's important the business community sees that they need to have more impact, less talks about revenue and what you bring in. It's more about what you give back, and to me that's that shift. You were talking about mindset, and there's not a lot of business owners that are in this in today here, and I think it's important that we start having those discussions to see how do we bring back revenue, how do we give it back to the communities, and how do we have that impact, right? So anyways, lots of great. I've got a lot of research to do on my end, so thanks for all the information, Alexandra. Thank you so much. I might connect with you.
Yeah, and is there a list of fun? Yeah, the if you look up, I think the website's called B Corp, um, bcorporation.net. I'll put it here, and then you kind of look it up by country. I'm pretty sure they have a list. Yeah, find a B Corp, because it is a certification, so you can filter by location and things like that. But yeah, New Brunswick does have a good number of B Corps actually. Yeah. Any other final questions? Um, so what I will say, I'll put my email in the chat. If you want the slide.
Vanessa,
Yeah,
can I add something?
you can.
Everyone. I know we didn't add it to our guide. I don't know if you mentioned the guide that we came out.
I did. I was like, I should put the link to that. I didn't do that yet.
So great resources. But I found out that BDC used to be called the Business Development Bank of Canada. I don't know what it stands for now. They have some good information also on social enterprise, and knowing a lot of the government partners in New Brunswick, their mindset is a lot like the BDC mindset. So sometimes it would help to use either like they have spreadsheets and they have forms and all sorts of stuff that you can use to help you out. So you can check that as well. BDC.ca.
Yeah, BDC has like tons of awesome resources. I agree. So I definitely I follow them as well because they release great tools all the time. Yes. Yeah. So the toolkit that Jose mentioned, I put the link in the chat. As I mentioned, we're hoping to have the registration link for the conference figured out on Monday. But I'm pretty sure we have a save the date. If not, you can just email me for the registration link if you're not interested in joining the newsletter. But we of course invite you to join the newsletter, which you can join from our website there as well. So thanks so much. I really appreciate your time. I hope to see many more social enterprise in New Brunswick. So, maybe the next one's in Albert County. I don't know. Maybe one in Riverview. Maybe, like lots of them. But I look forward to visiting your social enterprises. So over to you, Kristen.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. And maybe to keep it easier for you, I'll be in touch. We'll gather that information from you, and along with the recording, we can send along to all participants. But thank you so much for your knowledge, the sharing of the knowledge, the resources, and also all of you participants for really joining actively and sharing your stories, sharing your goals. We look forward to connecting with you and supporting you. So just know, if there's one thing you can take away today, is on this journey, you're definitely not alone. You have Pondish Ponde, you have the Southeast Regional Service Commission, and many other resources that are there for you on this journey. So we'll be in touch via email. We'll be sharing the recording as well as the resources. And so if there are any questions, you can certainly let us know. I am dropping currently in the chat, if you are specifically a nonprofit looking for more information or support, I'm dropping our newsletter because you may also benefit from other services that we have. So the link that is there is for the English newsletter. Should you ever want the French newsletter, you can certainly reach out to me when I send out the email. But if you are an entrepreneur looking for more support, the beautiful Alexandra, Joelle on our team, they are both, well, Alexandra is there for you essentially if you have any questions, but everything that they do and offer is found on their website. And so thank you, everybody. We look forward to working with you. You're not alone on this journey. And thanks again for your time, everyone.